My name is Mara Ellington, and for nearly 3 decades, I dedicated my life to ensuring that Gateway Robotics and Welding Corp. GRW followed every compliance rule down to the smallest printed line. I was 61 years old, 3 days away from my pension fully vesting, 3 days away from the security I had worked for since my 20s. But on a cold Tuesday morning, everything changed. The message came out of nowhere. Can you come to my office? Robert Calloway, the newly appointed Director of Operations, had been with GRW for just under 5 years. Cold, calculating, and deeply ambitious, he had a reputation for cutting corners, promoting his favorites, and removing anyone who stood in the way of his climb. I was not one of his favorites. When I stepped into his office, my eyes immediately caught the manila folder on his glass desk. His fingers rested lightly on it, tapping slowly, almost rhythmically. "Mara," he said with a smile that carried no warmth, "how long have you been with us now?" 29 years, almost 30. 29 years and 362 days, I replied calmly, though my stomach tightened. He leaned back, folding his hands behind his head. "That's quite the milestone." "Really, it is." The silence stretched for a moment before he pushed the folder toward me. "Due to restructuring and budget adjustments, we have to let you go. This," his finger tapped the folder, "is your severance package. Sign by tomorrow, or the offer is void." I blinked. Budget cuts. GRW had reported its highest profits last quarter. Effective immediately, he continued, "Cynthia from HR will help you pack your things." My pulse thudded, but my voice remained steady. "My pension vests on Monday." Robert smiled, a thin, victorious smile. "I'm aware." That was the moment I understood. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't restructuring. This was a targeted removal. 30 years of loyalty erased 3 days before they owed me what I'd earned. I stood up slowly, refusing to give him the emotional reaction he clearly expected. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said. His brows lifted, surprised. Cynthia Marks, HR representative, kind eyes, always nervous around authority, waited by the door. She walked with me down the hallway like she was escorting someone to their sentencing. "I'm so sorry, Mara," she whispered. "I had to process the paperwork." "I didn't want to." I nodded, managing a small smile. "It's not your fault." At my desk, I packed quietly. A photo of my late husband Harold, smiling in the garden he loved. A drawing my daughter Julia made for me when she was 10. A ceramic mug from a company Christmas party years ago. Every object felt heavier than usual. As we walked out, Cynthia hesitated. "You know," she said softly, "everyone knows what he's doing. The timing isn't an accident." No, it wasn't. And it wasn't legal, either. For years, I had been documenting internal irregularities, inconsistent invoices, delayed audit reports, red flags in expenses, patterns that became more concerning after Robert's promotion. Now they wanted me gone before I connected the dots completely. But what they didn't know was this: I had already connected them. And firing me was their biggest mistake. I walked out of the GRW building with a cardboard box in my hands and 30 years of my life packed inside it. Outside, the winter wind cut through my coat, but the cold I felt was deeper, heavy, deliberate, and personal. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the severance folder still unopened beside me. 3 days. They fired me 3 days before my pension vested. The timing was too perfect to be accidental. I finally opened the folder. My severance was barely 3 months of pay, far less than what someone with nearly 3 decades of service should receive. And the documents were dated the day before I was fired. They had planned this well in advance. As I flipped through the pages, one sentence made my stomach twist: employee termination due to redundancy and performance restructuring. Performance. In 30 years, I had never received a single warning, complaint, or negative review. Not one. I closed the folder and tightened my grip. They wanted me gone because I had seen too much. For years, I kept detailed notes on every suspicious discrepancy I came across: questionable third-party vendor payments, inflated equipment expenses, unaccounted shipments, and unusually rushed approvals. Most of these irregularities traced back to departments overseen by Robert Calloway. I didn't know exactly what he was doing, but I knew it was wrong. And Robert knew I knew. That was enough for him to push me out. When I reached home, my daughter Julia was already there, sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. "What happened?" "Cynthia from HR texted me," she said, standing quickly. "Mom, are you okay?" I set the box down and exhaled slowly. I was fired. Julia's mouth fell open. "What? Why? You've been there forever." "How can they? Budget cuts," I replied, shaking my head. "That's what they claimed." Julia's eyes narrowed, the same way her father, Harold, used to react whenever he sensed someone lying. "That doesn't make sense. GRW just had a record quarter. Something's wrong." I smiled faintly. "You always were quick to see through nonsense." She moved closer, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "Mom, do you think this has to do with what you've been investigating?" Investigation. Such a big word for the quiet, careful documentation I had done for years, even when others told me to stop being so thorough. "Yes," I admitted. "I think it has everything to do with that." And then I told her. Not everything, some things were still too tangled, too uncertain, but enough that she understood the weight of what was happening. When I finished, Julia took a deep breath. "We are not letting them get away with this." Her determination was a lifeline I didn't know I needed. Later that night, I sat at my desk reviewing copies of old notes, emails, and reports I had saved over the years. A habit of mine, backups for backups. I was grateful for it now. Invoices that didn't match shipment logs. Payments approved on days Robert wasn't even in the country. Consultant fees paid to shell companies with no digital footprint. It was all there. It had always been there. I just didn't realize how deeply it ran until now. As I organized my files, a name kept appearing more frequently than I remembered: Marcus Varela, Internal Audit Supervisor. Marcus had always been polite, but distant, someone who avoided unnecessary conversations. But over the past year, every audit he completed seemed rushed or incomplete. Was he incompetent? Or was he helping cover something up? My mind spiraled with possibilities, but one thing was clear: my firing wasn't an end. It was the beginning. And this time, I wasn't alone. I picked up my phone and sent a message to the one person I knew I needed now: "Naomi, it's Mara. I need your help. They fired me." My attorney, and my old friend, replied almost instantly. "Come tomorrow. We'll fight this." For the first time that day, I felt something other than anger or grief. I felt resolve. The next morning, I arrived at Naomi Fletcher's law office with a folder full of documents and a knot in my stomach. Naomi had been a close friend of mine since college, sharp-tongued, fearless, and known for demolishing companies that thought they were too big to be held accountable. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Sit," she said, guiding me to her desk. "Tell me everything." Slowly, I laid the severance folder in front of her. Naomi flipped through it, her jaw clenching tighter with every page. "They fired you 3 days before your pension vests," she muttered. "Cowards." "It's more than that," I said softly. "They've been hiding something. A lot of somethings." Naomi looked up sharply. Show me. I opened my own folder, thick with copies of emails, invoices, audit discrepancies, and time-stamped notes. As I spread the documents across her desk, Naomi's expression shifted from anger, to focus, to something far more serious. Mara, she said slowly, what you've collected isn't small. This isn't petty fraud or sloppy bookkeeping. This is coordinated. I nodded. And Robert Calloway is at the center of it. Naomi leaned back, tapping a pen against her lip. Tell me about the internal auditor again. Marcus Varela, I said. His audits have been rushed, incomplete, or manipulated. He's either incompetent, or someone's paying him to look the other way. Or both, Naomi murmured. She organized the documents into piles, labeling them as she went: vendors, payments, missing shipments, Callaway approvals, audit gaps. Then she sighed. This is going to be big. I swallowed. Naomi. I'm scared. She reached across the table, placing her hand on mine. You should be. But you're not alone. That afternoon, she walked me through what would happen next. First, she would file a wrongful termination claim and request a formal investigation into GRW's internal operations. That alone would make the company panic. They hated external scrutiny. Second, Naomi would send a legal preservation notice, preventing GRW from destroying or altering any internal documents related to me or the flagged transactions. They'll try to cover their tracks, Naomi warned, but this will make that a crime. Third, and most terrifying, she wanted me to become a whistleblower. This goes far beyond firing you, Naomi said. If Robert has been siphoning company money, inflating expenses, or creating shell vendors, he's committed federal fraud. I stared at her. Federal? Yes, she said firmly. This isn't just corporate misconduct. This could be criminal. My hands trembled slightly. I had spent my life following rules, documenting facts, and protecting the integrity of the company. To think that the very leadership I trusted had been exploiting the system, it made my stomach twist. What happens if I become a whistleblower? I asked quietly. You'll be protected, she said. Legally, financially, and publicly. They can't retaliate further. They already fired me, I whispered. Naomi smiled sadly. And that may turn out to be the best mistake they ever made. Later in the afternoon, I received a message from my daughter, Julia. How did it go? Any news? Me, it's going to be a long battle. But Naomi thinks we have a case. A strong one. A moment later, Julia replied, *good. I'm with you. Whatever happens, we fight. Her support strengthened me. That evening, I began reviewing Marcus Varela's audits once again. The more I looked, the more inconsistencies I found. Missing attachments. Unexplained approvals. Vendor payments signed off by Marcus even when he was supposedly on leave. But the biggest red flag was a vendor name that kept appearing, Ridgeway Consulting LLC. I'd never seen any physical work, reports, or correspondence from them, and yet they were paid more than any other contractor in the past year. Who were they? And why was GRW funneling money to them? I wrote the name on a sticky note and placed it at the top of my file. Something told me Ridgeway was the key. And I was going to find out exactly what it was hiding. That night, after hours of combing through paperwork, one detail kept gnawing at me: the mysterious vendor, Ridgeway Consulting LLC. The name appeared repeatedly in Marcus Varela's audits, almost always tied to large payments and flagged invoices. Yet, despite being GRW's top consultant, there were no reports, no deliverables, no emails, nothing. A ghost company. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: visit the bank branch where GRW processed most of its vendor transactions. I wasn't sure the bank would tell me anything, but I needed answers. Deborah Collins, the branch manager, had known me for years. She'd often helped process compliance verifications for GRW. When I walked into her office, she looked surprised. "Mara, I didn't expect to see you here. Everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Actually, no. I need your help with something unusual." Her brows knitted with concern. "Tell me." I sat across from her and lowered my voice. "Deborah, I'm not asking for confidential client information. But I need to know if GRW recently opened, or transferred funds to, an account under the name Ridgeway Consulting." Deborah leaned forward. "Is this about your job? Cynthia mentioned you were let go." "Yes," I said quietly. "And I believe something illegal is happening. Something big." Her expression shifted. She closed her office door, returning with a seriousness that made my heart thump. "Mara, I can't show you their account details. But I can tell you if something looks strange." She typed for a moment, glanced at her screen, then inhaled sharply. "Ridgeway Consulting," she hesitated. "This account was opened less than a year ago. It receives large transfers, always round numbers. No spending. No withdrawals. Just deposits." My throat tightened. Exactly what I feared. "Who opened it?" I whispered. She stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. "Someone with authority at GRW. Someone high." "Robert Calloway," I said automatically. She didn't confirm it. But she didn't deny it. Deborah closed the file quickly. "Mara, if what you suspect is true, this isn't just corporate misconduct. This is money laundering." The room felt colder. Money laundering. Fraud. Criminal intent. It was worse than I imagined. Deborah reached for my hand. "Please be careful. People who hide things like this don't like being exposed." "I know," I whispered. When I got home, Julia was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed. "You're pale," she said. "Mom, what happened?" "I think Robert is funneling company money into a shell firm," I told her. "And Ridgeway Consulting is the shell." Her eyes widened. "Mom, this is serious." "Yes," I said softly. "Which means we are in deeper than I realized." Before we talked further, my phone buzzed. A message from Naomi: "Need you to come in tomorrow. We've received a response from GRW's legal team. It's aggressive." Aggressive. That didn't surprise me. Robert would do anything to protect himself. That night, I reviewed more files, but one set of documents caught my attention: expense reports signed off by Marcus Varela whenever Ridgeway payments went through. Marcus. Quiet, careful, seemingly harmless Marcus. Was he willingly involved? Or forced? It was time to find out. I drafted a simple message: "Marcus, it's Mara. I know things are complicated right now, but I need to talk. It's important." I didn't expect him to reply. But within minutes, he did. "Not safe to talk here. Meet me tomorrow. 8 p.m. The old Riverside coffee shop. Come alone." My breath caught. Why not safe? Why secrecy? Julia saw the message and stepped closer. "You're not going alone." "I have to," I said. "If Marcus is scared, it means he knows something. Maybe too much." "Mom, I'll be careful," I promised. But inside, fear crept in like a slow-moving shadow. Someone at GRW was laundering money. Someone was covering it up, and someone was getting nervous that I was still digging. Meeting Marcus could give me answers. Or it could put me in danger. Either way. I had no choice. The next day felt unnervingly long. I spent the morning with Naomi Fletcher, going through GRW's legal response. As she predicted, it was hostile, filled with accusations meant to intimidate me, insubordination, declining performance, behavioral concerns. All fabricated. All designed to bury the truth. Naomi slammed the papers shut. They are desperate, she said flatly. When companies start rewriting history, it means you've hit a nerve. But even as we discussed legal strategy, my mind wasn't fully present. All I could think about was the message from Marcus Varela. Meet me. 8 p.m. Riverside Cafe. Come alone. Not safe to talk here. Why wasn't it safe? Was he being watched? Was Robert monitoring him? Had Marcus been threatened? By the time evening arrived, my nerves were raw. Julia followed me to the front door, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Mom, I don't like this. Meeting someone who says it's not safe, that sounds dangerous. I'll be careful, I said, squeezing her hand. But Marcus may be the only person who can confirm everything we've suspected. She sighed heavily. Text me the second you get there. And the second you leave. I promise. The Riverside Cafe sat on an older part of town, small, dimly lit, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. When I walked in, it was nearly empty except for 2 college students in the corner, and a barista wiping down counters. Marcus was already there, hunched in a booth near the back. He looked different, tired, anxious, constantly glancing over his shoulder. Mara, he whispered when I approached, sit. I slid into the booth, heart pounding. What's going on, Marcus? Why did you ask to meet? He swallowed hard, eyes darting again to the door. They know, he finally said. They know you've been digging. My breath caught. Who? Robert. And more than that, people above him. People who don't want any of this exposed. I leaned forward. Marcus, I need you to be clear. What exactly is happening? For a moment, he looked like he might break down. His hands were shaking. I didn't want any part of this, he whispered. I thought it was harmless at first. Just approving a few invoices, adjusting some numbers. Robert said it was temporary, that the company would reimburse everything later. What numbers? I asked. The Ridgeway transfers, he replied. Those payments, they are not for consulting. They are diversions. My stomach tightened. Where is the money going? Marcus exhaled shakily. The account has another beneficiary. Someone outside the company. Someone Robert communicates with privately. I don't know their name, but I saw a transaction once. A large one. Transferred overseas. Overseas. This was even bigger than we assumed. Marcus, I said carefully, you need to testify. Come with me to Naomi. Tell her everything. His eyes widened in fear. I can't. You don't understand. He leaned closer. They threatened me. My blood went cold. Threatened? How? If I talked, he whispered, they said they'd pin everything on me. Make it look like I created the shell companies. I forged the approvals. They have access to my credentials, they could fabricate anything. Marcus, Ann, his voice cracked. They know where my family lives. I felt the air leave my lungs. Suddenly everything made sense. His rushed audits. His silence. His unwillingness to question anything. Marcus wasn't protecting Robert. He was protecting his family. Why tell me this? I asked softly. He hesitated, then looked at me with desperate eyes. Because they think they scared you off. Firing you was supposed to end it. But you're still digging. And if you keep going without knowing the danger, he shook his head. They'll come after you next. A chill ran down my spine. Do you think they already are? Marcus didn't answer. He just stared at me, with pity. Then he slid a small envelope across the table. What is this? I asked. Proof, he whispered. Not much. Just one piece. But enough to show you that you're right. I opened the envelope, hands trembling. Inside was a photocopy of an internal ledger, signed by Robert Calloway, approving a transfer to Ridgeway Consulting for an international compliance project. There was no such project. This is all I can give you, Marcus said, voice breaking. Please, be careful. Before I could say another word, he stood quickly and walked out of the cafe, disappearing into the cold night. I sat frozen in place, staring at the document in my hands. Marcus was terrified. Robert was hiding something massive. And now? I had proof. But I also had something else, a target on my back. It was late at night, and Shayan stood on his apartment balcony, staring at the city lights scattered across the darkness like distant hopes. The air was cool, but the storm inside him was louder, heavier, and far more unsettling. The pressure from work, Elena's silence that carried more weight than words, and the constant pull between duty and truth, everything inside him felt as if it were tearing in different directions. He knew he had reached a point in life where going back felt impossible, and moving forward felt painful. Just then, his phone vibrated on the railing beside him. He glanced at the screen, and froze. Myra calling, Shayan exhaled deeply. Whether he should answer, or ignore the call felt like a decision heavier than anything he had made all week. The person who had once understood him without explanation, he had been forced to distance himself from her. That bond had been friendship too, courage too, and honesty too, yet the world would never understand it. Still, his heart pressed a quiet yes, and he picked up. Hello. His voice sounded tired, unfamiliar even to himself. Are you okay? Myra's voice was gentle, soft, the kind of tone that didn't demand an answer but offered a place to breathe. And that one question cracked something inside him. I'm trying, he whispered. Sometimes it feels like I'm just a guest in my own life, watching things fall apart from the outside. There was a moment of silence on the other side. Then Myra spoke, slowly, almost painfully clear. Shayan, you've been surviving for too long. When will you start living? Her words hit him like truth often does, sharply, cleanly, without permission. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said quietly. And what are you gaining by hurting yourself? She replied, not accusing, not angry, just honest. A faint tear stung his eyes. He wasn't crying, but he wasn't holding together either. It was a strange kind of breaking, silent, invisible, but real. Your life belongs to you, Shayan, Myra said gently. If you don't stand up for yourself, no one else ever will. The city seemed to fall quieter around him, as if even the night was listening. Myra's words settled in his chest like something he already knew, but had been too afraid to admit. How long had he been living on autopilot? How long had he walked with a weight that wasn't his? How long had he convinced himself that sacrifice was strength, when in truth, it was only fear? After the call ended, Shayan remained on the balcony for a long time. He looked at the city, alive, moving, flawed, beautiful. And for the first time in months, he felt a shift inside him. Small, but undeniable. Like a light turning on in a dark room. Maybe things wouldn't be easy. Maybe he would lose people. Maybe choosing himself would come with consequences he wasn't ready for. But one thing was clear, he couldn't stay silent anymore. He couldn't keep shrinking himself to make others comfortable. He couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine while slowly disappearing inside. That night, something changed, not outside, but within. A realization, a spark, a quiet rebellion. Sometimes all it takes is one honest conversation to make you realize you've been living someone else's life. And sometimes, the first step to healing is simply deciding you deserve better. For the first time in a long time, Shayan felt it, the beginning of courage. The next morning, Shayan woke up earlier than usual. Not because he had slept well, he hadn't, but because something inside him refused to let him keep pretending. The conversation with Myra replayed in his mind like a quiet echo. Your life belongs to you, Shayan. Those words had settled deep in his chest, and now they refused to leave. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of years pressing on his shoulders, expectations, fears, responsibilities, silence. He had lived his entire adult life believing that endurance was strength, that compromise was loyalty, that suffering quietly was maturity. But now he finally understood. Endurance without purpose is exhaustion, and loyalty without respect is imprisonment. He looked over at the closed bedroom door where Elena had left for work earlier, without a goodbye, without a glance, without the slightest attempt to ask what was happening inside him. That absence hurt more than anger ever could. Silence between two people can be louder than any fight. He knew today had to be different. He showered, got dressed, and stood in front of the mirror. He looked like himself, yet he didn't feel like the man he had been yesterday. Something had shifted. Something had awakened. With a deep breath, he grabbed his keys and left the apartment. At the office when Shayan walked into the building, people greeted him with the usual polite smiles. But he wasn't paying attention. His steps felt heavier, more deliberate, as if each one was leading him toward something final. He went straight to Mr. Hanley's office, his boss, the man who had spent months piling pressure on him, dismissing his efforts, and letting others take credit for his work. "Come in," Hanley said without looking up from his laptop. Shayan stepped inside and closed the door. His hands weren't shaking. His voice didn't tremble. The fear that once lived inside him suddenly felt gone. "I want to talk about my position here," Shayan said calmly. Hanley finally looked up, annoyed. "If this is about the overtime, we've already discussed, it's not about the overtime," Shayan cut him off softly, but firmly. It was the first time he had ever interrupted him. Hanley raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it?" Shayan took a breath. "I'm resigning." The room fell silent. "What?" Hanley leaned back, shocked. "Do you know how difficult it will be for you to find something else? Jobs like this aren't easy to come by." Shayan didn't flinch. "Neither is self-respect." Hanley scoffed. "We've invested in you, and I gave you years of my life," Shayan replied. "Years you never valued." For a moment, Hanley didn't know what to say. It was the first time Shayan had spoken to him without fear. That alone told him it was over. "I'll write an official notice," Shayan said and turned toward the door. "You're making a mistake," Hanley muttered. Shayan paused. "Maybe. But at least, it will be my mistake." He walked out, not fast, not slow, just steady. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something familiar and forgotten: freedom. The call as he stepped out of the building, his phone buzzed. A message from Myra. "Did you do it?" Shayan didn't type a long reply. He simply wrote, "Yes." Within seconds, her response came, "I'm proud of you." He stared at those words for a long time. Not because they came from her, though that mattered, but because no one had said those words to him in years. And in that moment, as he looked at the sky stretching open above him, Shayan knew, this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a life he finally chose for himself. The evening air felt unusually calm, as Shayan walked through the quiet streets toward his apartment. His resignation letter still sat folded in his pocket, light as paper, heavy as history. Every step he took felt like he was walking out of an old version of himself, leaving behind the fear, the guilt, the silence that had defined him for too long. When he reached home, the lights inside were already on. Elena was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, eyes sharp the moment he entered. "You're early," she said, her voice flat. "I quit my job," Shayan replied plainly. Her expression cracked. "You what? Are you out of your mind?" "No," he said calmly. "For the first time, I'm not." She stood up, pacing. "Shayan, we have responsibilities. We have bills. We have a life, he repeated quietly. "But we stopped having a relationship a long time ago." Her face hardened. "So this is about that woman, isn't it? About Myra?" Shayan didn't flinch. "This is about me." Elena shook her head. "You're throwing everything away." "No," he said gently. "I'm letting go of what was already broken." For a second, Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Maybe she realized the truth too. Maybe she knew this day had been coming. Or maybe she finally saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that isn't caused by lack of sleep, but by years of being unseen. After a long silence, her voice softened. "So what now?" Shayan looked around their living room, the place where they once shared dreams before they turned into quiet strangers living parallel lives. "I think we should take some time apart," he said honestly. "Figure out who we are, without hurting each other anymore." Elena lowered her gaze. When she finally looked back up, there were no tears, only acceptance. "Maybe you're right," she whispered. And in that moment, Shayan realized something. Sometimes relationships end not with shouting, but with two people quietly acknowledging the truth they can't outrun. A new morning the next day, Shayan packed a small bag and left to stay with a cousin for a few weeks. He wasn't running away, he was stepping out so he could breathe again. He stood at the bus stop, sunlight spilling across the street, warming a heart that had lived in cold shadows for too long. His phone buzzed. "Myra, did you talk to her?" He typed slowly, "Yes. We both agreed we need time apart." Her reply came softer this time, "I know that wasn't easy. I'm here, if you ever need someone to talk to." Shayan smiled faintly. Not because she offered comfort, but because he no longer felt ashamed to receive it. He boarded the bus, sat by the window, and watched the city move past him. The same streets, the same buildings, the same people, yet everything looked different now. Brighter. Wider. Possible. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deadlines, arguments, or expectations. He was thinking about possibility. About rediscovering who he was before life buried him under responsibilities and silence. Finding himself again, he spent the next few weeks walking, reading, thinking. He talked to his cousin, reconnected with old hobbies, and even started applying for new positions, jobs aligned with his values, jobs that offered balance, not burnout. Myra never pushed, never interfered. She checked in occasionally, gently, like someone who cared without wanting to control. And slowly, quietly, beautifully, Shayan began to feel whole again. He realized something profound: healing doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes with space, honesty, and the courage to choose yourself. One evening, he stood by the window of his cousin's house, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The sky looked like a painting, soft, warm, forgiving. And Shayan whispered to himself, "I'm finally living. Not surviving. Not pretending. Not carrying the weight of others' expectations. Living." His past hadn't disappeared. His mistakes hadn't vanished. But now, he walked forward without chains, only lessons. Sometimes, he thought, life breaks you to rebuild you. Sometimes you lose everything, so you can find yourself. And that, finally, was enough.